Welcome to another episode of Catalyzing Radical Systemic Change, where in my own language it's all about discovering, mapping, and cross-pollinating the various building blocks towards a planetary civilization ahead. What do I mean with a planetary civilization? Well, I basically mean that we as human beings, as the dominant species on this planet, need to become aware that ultimately we're the shepherds for the next generations after us. And this is all in the context that I often say we, as the people speaking today, or usually the guests in my podcast, we're a threshold generation. So a threshold generation means at best we can leave like seedlings or maybe sproutlings to the many generations after us to try to work on the many systems that we're embedded in. The context of today's conversation is the largest transfer of wealth in human history. And in as much as many people focus on the systems and the structures on the outside, let's say classical wealth management and legacy or transitioning wealth, today we'll focus on the hidden layers. Why is that important? So I don't know if anybody of the listeners has ever heard, for example, about family constellation work. So in as much as you personally can work on yourself, there are deeper embedded family dynamics that especially become prevalent when it comes down to handing over legacy wealth. It's my great pleasure to be connected with Carie Bailey that I met at Volcano Summit around about a year ago. And like always in the podcast, before we dive into the topic and map the topic of today's podcast, Carie, I'm really curious what made you the human being that you are and that you sketch 2 or 3 pivotal moments in your biography that connect you with the topic of today's podcast. Having said all of that, great pleasure to have you, Carie, and happy to have you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hello, Alistair. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I was thinking about these pivotal moments since our last conversation. And actually, there's 4 that are there, and I know we don't want to spend all of the time on those, but each of these played a pivotal role. And first, I was remembering just the ache, like what happened at the beginning. And to just give a quick context before I dive into these pivotal moments, I was taken from my dad when I was young. I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I was taken away by my mother, who was mentally ill. And so my father was told that we were just going on vacation to see her family. And I had this knowing that she wasn't telling the truth and that we were never coming back. And I just remember grabbing onto my dad's legs and, being pulled away from him. And so fast forward, our life was very dark. She was very violent. And I was the youngest of 4 children. And so I remember, and so for me, most of my childhood memories are blacked out, and I have a couple memories that have surfaced. And one of them was when so my mother would drag me out of my bed or out of my hiding place at night, and into this hallway or into her room to beat me at night. And one particular moment I remember, I think I was around 8 or 9 years old, and it was just an extra difficult night with her. And I had this moment on the floor where I was laying there and my whole body ached, and I was very confused, especially because she seemed to feel better after she hurt me. And so that was an added layer of complexity that was confusing for me. But on this particular night, something different happened. I was laying there on the floor and my body was hurting as typical, but inside of me, I went through and I cycled differently through the why me. And I had already created this story of, oh, there must be something about me that is wrong. Something inherently is flawed. I'm damaged in some way, and I don't deserve to be loved like all of my friends. And so I had already had that story, but in this moment, I had been holding on to this hope that someone would see, that someone would come and rescue me. And in this moment, I realized no one was coming. No one saw. And if they saw, they didn't know what to do, or they turned the other way. And in this moment of realizing no one was coming, I circled through in my mind this like, well, I'm just a little girl. How am I to go into this world that felt very scary and dark on my own? And then I heard a voice from within me that was my voice that just very briefly said, "Get up." And it was this matter of fact, unemotional, well, of course, this is what you do. And the moment was significant for me because it was the first time that I could feel my body was just like, I give, I wanted to tap out. My head didn't know what to do, but there was this inner knowing, and it was my first experience with it that knew exactly what to do. And so I just picked myself up off the floor and went to bed. And so that was my first experience of that. That was pivotal. I had later experiences like that, but that was the first where I connected to this inner knowing that and I realized that there was this aspect of me that knew what to do that was beyond the level of the intelligence from my brain. And then fast forward, by the time I was 11, after living this way with my mother, excuse me, my entire childhood, when I was 11, it felt like I was completely dark inside. Like every time she beat me apart, like an innocence or this light inside of me was replaced with darkness and replaced with anger and rage and confusion and a desire to not want to live. And so by the time I was 11, or to want other people to hurt the way that I hurt so that they would know what it felt like. And of course I didn't want to cause harm, but the core of that was a desire for someone to know what it felt like. And so by the time I was 11, I just felt completely dark inside. And my grandparents went to church, and my mom never really liked that. I would get um, hurt for going to church. And so I just remember I was around 11 and I was standing in the back of this room, and it was like this group of children and they were singing songs. And I looked around and I saw the light in these kids. I saw the innocence, and I felt very different. I felt like I didn't have that innocence anymore. And I just remember thinking, this life sucks. This is a game I don't want to play. It's a cruel joke. Like, I want out. This is really lame. And we were invited to stand up and sing this song, and I was so thankful that there was this woman standing there with the words, because everyone else knew the song and I didn't. And so this song was called "I Am a Child of God." And it was a moment, those moments where, like, in a flash, you understand so much. It was a moment for me that was like that. So the words of the song were, it started out, "I am a child of God and he has sent me here." And just instantly, it was like the crown of, the crown chakra opened up. And I just felt this beam of light coming all the way through my system. And I felt kind of activated, or like woken up, or it was like this fire coursed through my body, and I felt something awaken in me that I didn't even realize was there. And I realized that I'm not just my mom's child. And my dad wasn't allowed to come and see me, and I like didn't even at this point of my life talk to him much. And because like access to him was blocked off. And so and I had, of course, this story of like, he didn't come and he doesn't care either. And so in this moment, I realized that I wasn't just their children, that there was someone else, this beautiful creator with this fatherly, loving energy that knew me, that saw me. And so it was a moment of identity change for me, that there was someone else, and that I actually was cared, and I was loved, and I was seen, and someone did actually know what I was going through, even if I didn't know who that was on this plane of like humans around me, because it seemed like no adult, like, got a clue. Um, and so
Then
then the
let me
next,
let
yeah,
me tie into that before you go
yeah, yeah.
into the third pivotal moment, because there's a really a
Mhm.
striking similarity in our biography, it seems. Even though I come from a loving family, I had a very early
Mhm.
childhood accident. And when I told my parents I want to serve in Catholic Church, which I
Mhm.
fervently did like many days a week, and became an
Yeah.
altar boy,
Mhm.
I just wanted to mirror back that it seems for some of us, it's really early in their biography that they have a connection to God, the
Mm-hmm.
higher self, truth,
Mm-hmm.
the universe. And I just find that very interesting because usually, with some exceptions, but to most people, it really happens through deep pain and suffering, right?
Yeah.
Can you can you sketch when you sketch the next moments? When
Mm-hmm.
was a part in your biography that you had the feeling, because ultimately what you're up to is a really monumental undertaking, and I think a very
Mm-hmm.
important one, to
Thank
help
you.
families heal on a deeper level. When that
Mm-hmm.
came into play, like from the darkness to the light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually my third and fourth experience was very much that. And on the family dynamic, actually the very next line of this song was, "He's given me an earthly home with parents kind and dear." And I instantly was like, well, that's not true for me. But in that moment there was this instant knowing that was a remembrance of the divine sacred nature of families. And so there was a like remembering the divine design of families, and I remembered what they're supposed to be, and that the family unit was designed to be a sacred container for each of us to be deeply seen, to be deeply known, to be deeply loved, and to use that container to access our greater capabilities and higher contribution to this world. And that was the design of it. And I was just born into a family that didn't remember and couldn't access that. And because they didn't remember and they couldn't see who they were, they couldn't see who I was. And so there was just this, instant knowing of all of these things and seeing what was possible in families, which was my greatest desire. And then the next line, with the chorus was, "Lead me, guide me, walk beside me, help me find the way. Teach me all that I must do to live with him someday." And I just had this like, oh, I get the end game now. I get that my like life is to learn how to connect with this divine essence and to be led and guided through the ups and the downs, and that one day we'll all go back. And that was like, okay, I got the goal now, because for me, I needed that. I needed the vision of something, because otherwise it seemed very pointless. And so what I knew in that moment was that I needed to live my life to connect to this higher power and to live in a way that I felt what I felt in that moment. And so it became my life's goal to be led and guided by that. And so it became kind of what I sifted through. And so, and there was a recognition of that spirit, that what speaks to my heart and soul as truth. And so that was, kind of that pivotal. And then I would say my shift. So even though I had that, and I now had my compass, I know what that feeling was. I knew who my ultimate guide was, and I knew like the destination. That didn't mean that life didn't continue to throw heartaches at me, right? And so it did. And fast forward now, and I'm married. And I thought that when I was married, I thought, okay, well, like the ultimate goal is family. So when I'm married, and again, like I was a little girl watching Cinderella who, like, she sees her Prince Charming, she finds her Prince Charming, and they live happily ever after. And I remember like leaning into the happily ever after and being like, I have to see what that looks like. Like I gotta know what that looks like. And so fast forward, and I'm married, and like I, have three beautiful children, and my husband would tell me he loved me, and it was like he said, "I like your dress." I couldn't feel it. And my kids would wrap their arms around me and their little hands, and they would kiss me on the cheek, and they would just give me all this love. And I realized I couldn't feel it. And I would see their laughter and their joy that was like inherently natural. And it felt like I was watching some distant thing that I like couldn't access. And I realized that because I had numbed out and like shoved all of my challenges so far deep, that like you couldn't have paid me to touch that, because I believed I was stronger and better, and for not allowing my childhood to affect me, right? Like that didn't affect me. Like my life started in college, and then when I had a challenge there, okay, my life started after this. And so I realized this numbing that because I pushed down the painful stuff, I also couldn't feel the joy and I couldn't receive love. And so that's the point, this like sense of complete disconnection and numbing. The only feeling I really knew how to access very, very well was this loneliness. And so at this moment, there was this woman who entered my life, and I just saw her in passing and knew that she was someone these intuitive nudges you get, like this knowing that you need to talk to someone. And so she invited me to her house, and I came in, and she like saged me, at the entrance. And I walk in, and there's this beautiful cacao, which I didn't know what that was at the time, with fresh flowers cut. And she invites me to come and to sit in her living room floor. And we drink this cacao, and she looks at me and she says, "Carie, how is your heart?"
Can we stay there, because
Yes.
I'm really touched, and I
Yes.
think for anybody listening, this is such an important moment. We come from a very different biography, but I spent many years with healers and shamans and, as you know, spiritual masters. And
Mm-hmm.
when was this, maybe even stronger than pivotal, like almost like a tilting in your being, when you had a first deeper recognition of feeling embodied, that
Mm-hmm.
below or beneath or behind
Mm-hmm.
all these layers of trauma and
Mm-hmm.
pain and suffering and numbing, there was actually, some would say, the original face, some would say the divine
Mm-hmm.
essence, some would simply say essence. Was this like during the cacao ceremony that you're about to sketch? Because for me,
Mm-hmm.
give me just one argument more. I think it's one thing to have the first divine healing moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is to be able to integrate it in everyday life and to
Mm-hmm.
sustain it. Because
Yeah.
I won't share too much about my biography, but I know that certainly that I had discovered these healing
Mm-hmm.
moments, but then
Mm-hmm.
also lost them. And this is
Yes.
often, a longer journey. So yeah, anyhow,
Mm-hmm.
just a couple of
Yes.
riffs of what you shared.
And integration, I would say, was in Germany, was my deep dive. So that's not yet at this moment, because this moment was an introduction to something else there, right? Like in my childhood and other moments, there was this voice that came, but I had no idea what that was. Like I was completely oblivious to the sense of self that is unbreakable, the true essence of who we are. Like, I would go to church and I would hear about divine nature. And I was like, yeah, yeah, okay. There's something about us that is great, that's divine. And I had no idea what that meant. And so in this moment with my friend, I learned about presence, and how presence actually, in the way we show up for each other, can be a vehicle to bring us into a remembrance of this true self, this divine essence, this divine identity. And this moment was that. This moment was for me a lesson about not only who I am, but what was possible in relationships, and then what's possible when we can listen in a way that we connect to our own intuitive knowing. And so I'll just briefly tell you about this experience, because she asked me how my heart was, and I'll tell you, Alistair, I was a master deflector. Like it's like I knew how to people please, I knew how to change the subject away from what was happening inside of me. And so and I feel like, and this is, as we look at systemically, we're surrounded by disconnection and distraction, and there's a craving, and I can feel, actually, just on a global scale, I can feel like the yearning and the longing for deep connection. And I had that. I was completely lonely, but I had all these walls and these barriers and these protective mechanisms that kept people at an arm's length. And this was a moment. And sometimes we try to share, and we give people kind of like a taster or like the iceberg, and we see what they do with it. And I was like I was masterful at realizing all the ways, like where people were stuck, because I could feel that. And so I had never, and here I was professionally helping people like really experience the thing that I wanted, the connection, because I knew the craving. And so this was the moment for me that I could feel in her presence that, number one, she could go anywhere. I didn't have to stay at the tip of the iceberg, and that was too much for her. And she was going to get triggered and swept up, and then it was going to be about her. I could feel that she had the capacity, because she had done her own inner work, and she had the power to feel that she could go into any dark place that I needed to and feel with me. And I could tell that she also wasn't going to see me differently because of the pain that I shared, that she wasn't going to feel like she had to fix me. She wasn't going to feel like she had to solve a problem. She was going to, like, that she saw this strength inherent in me, this recognition of this, my true self, my divine identity. That the challenges I was going through, she knew that I was on my journey to connecting with that. And so just through, like, that was all unspoken. That was all this felt presence. And as I tried to deflect and she wouldn't have it, and she re-asked me the question, it was the first time that I was willing to look at the wreckage that was my heart, because I was very content otherwise to like not even look. And not only did I look and see, but there was this audible exhale from like my soul, like I had been holding my breath the whole time, playing this game, trying to kind of tread water above and like make everything look good, because at this time in my life, I had everything. I had everything that I thought that would make me happy. And people would come to me constantly and want what I had and want my life. And little did they know that behind closed doors, like in my inner world, I was like silently suffering. And so it was the first time that I actually like could exhale and look. And not only did I see the wreckage that was my heart, and this like shattered, it felt like a dried up raisin with like 1,000 like stab wounds, but I also then connected to this inner knowing. Like no one had to tell me what I needed to do. I instantly like knew exactly what I needed to do, and connected to this like compass of like inner authority that would help guide, and discern what I needed. And so that was really incredible. Um, and then,
Let
yes,
me let me stay here.
yes,
How old were you when
I
that
was in my
happened?
mid-30s.
Very interesting. I was also in my mid 30s. I was actually 37, also with
Mm.
a woman. Uh,
Mm.
for whatever odd reason, besides that one Buddhist master, all my mentors, healers, and shamans have been women. I think I shared that
Mm.
with you. And it was
Mm.
also for the first time that my inner crumbling down and weeping and crying and
Mm.
sobbing and being totally overwhelmed had an instant, very profound healing moment on a somatic level.
Yeah.
Once somebody did not do the normal psychotherapeutical dialogue and instead just
Yeah.
witness and continue to ask me a question.
Mm-hmm.
It's more a technical question, but I'm just curious. Was there a part of that deeper recognition of that finding the compass that you could
Mm-hmm.
find somatically, like in a space in
Mm-hmm.
your body on a nervous system level? Because
Mm-hmm.
for me, that was the deepest healing. And actually, I would have to lie that ever since then, which was now close to 9 years ago, I've done that much, right? Because there was
Mm-hmm.
a moment in my biography where the healer told me, hey, Alistair, you can
Mm-hmm.
always continue to heal, 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 but you also want to do many things. I think that chapter of your life is closed. How about you now start building your own legacy? So, to mirror
Mm-hmm.
that back to you, once you had this inner compass, was it on a somatic level? And what were the next steps to then unfold, your
Mm-hmm.
own
Mm-hmm.
contribution and your legacy?
Beautiful. Yes. It was definitely somatic. It was like, it felt more of like in my solar plexus. That and for me, we can go vertical, but it also was a turning inward. So it was like from the outside to then the body, and then inward and beyond the emotions to a level of the soul. And that's what it felt like, is that it was more of a turning inward so deep that it's beyond all of the other things into this space. And I was also at the same time going through yoga teacher training, because at the same time I was helping other people with their trauma and realizing talking only went so far. And so I was super curious about the body. And so I had discovered this turning inward. And so all of this was at the same time. Um, and for me, then part of that turning inward, in answer to your question, was this recognition that there's some pain that is so deep that I believe only divine assistance can help. And that's what I discovered in the turning inward, was that it felt like I was stuck in some ways. Like it felt like, I don't know, for me, my capacity, I'll say it in this way. Like I was still working with clients in the role of a marriage and family therapist who was specializing in trauma and attachment. And I could get outside of, and I thought that this was what every therapist could do. I didn't realize it to be a gift until much later. But how I listen to people is that I literally can, like, I literally feel and see what people are sharing with me as they're sharing, as though I'm like in their world. And then I have this intuitive knowing of what they need. And so, and I could do that without it touching any of my pain. And it was almost that because I had such a depth of pain, there wasn't any space I couldn't go into, like that I was afraid to go into, or that I couldn't like sit with and be with and like allow it to come to its fullest. And so it actually, my pain gave me the capacity to sit in the pain of others. And so, yeah,
Can we stay there?
yeah, of
Because I think
course.
we, because I think we're at one of the biggest nugget moments for anybody on a personal development journey. I truly think, um, and have a felt recognition that unless, especially a therapist, but I would also say a shaman and a healer, have really discovered and fallen through the own rock bottom of their underworld, they
Hmm.
can't really hold it. So this is, I think, a big paradox to hold, because I think especially people like you and healers and shamans, they're put on a pedestal as if all of their life had been just a nice,
Shangri-La.
fluffy, you know,
Yeah.
expression. And it's actually quite the opposite. Those people have suffered a great deal. Many had near-death experiences, or they had
Mhm.
cancer, or they were close to going crazy, meaning psychotic or something like that.
Mhm.
And only in discovering below this like rock
Mhm.
bottom of the underworld,
Mhm.
the divine essence, or as in Germany, there's a beautiful word from a medieval mystic. He calls it the Urgrund, which literally means the ground below anything. Because
Mhm.
for me, when in the moments that I've felt this divine essence, it feels really like something that's way below, right? So
Yes.
can I ask you a couple of questions around, because in my own understanding, the essence
Mhm.
of the mystical experience of this
Mhm.
divine oneness and being held below before
Mhm.
any circumstances is the same in like all mystical traditions. And I know
Mhm.
you've touched upon, you just mentioned the yoga teacher training, which is usually in the Vedic tradition. Do you
Mhm.
have like one specific expression that you feel more drawn to, or is it more that you're like agnostic to the different traditions?
Um, I think the tradition for me is there's not a one way for me that feels like, oh, this is it, except this following the gravitational pull inward. For me, I find that the threads to that show up differently for people, whether it's a health related something or a relational thing or an internal pain like feeling not good enough or this loneliness or something. Those to me are these access points and these threads that, I refer to this ladder of emotional intimacy, where that is also the ladder of like depth of connection to our soul. It starts in the head and then it goes into like the feeling level, and then it goes beyond that to the level of the soul. And so for me, we can stay very distracted, and then, we can stay very intellectual, and then we can get stuck in our emotions or feel like the emotions is like it's the depth of it, but it's actually not. And we can get caught up in controlling emotions or trying to even just intellectually process them, but they're access points into a deeper remembrance of who we really are. And so for me, it's whichever method resonates most with people, great. Just allow it to draw you inward through that. Because for me, whether I'm doing yoga or whether I'm standing on the beach and like rooting into the earth and then, allowing the pulse to come up into me or and opening the crown chakra to receive more fully. For me, in different points of my, different moments, I need something else. But all of it is to pull me inward to connect to this true essence of who I really am and to connect to the higher power. And for me in this moment, when I was, it was my basement level. That you're describing, it was a moment where like before I could go in and end to other people's pain and it didn't affect me, but I now felt like I couldn't do that anymore. Like I would feel their pain and now I was touching mine too, which was very distinct. And it felt like the storm was coming. Because you couldn't have paid me, Alistair, to like do my inner work. Like I thought I was good. I didn't, not because I truly thought I was strong. I had bought into the like, oh, if you don't, if it doesn't affect you, you're good. And it was blind to how it was affecting me. And actually my clients were just so motivating to me because they were, the people who were magnetized to me had come from just like off the charts trauma. And they had gone through like coaching and like I was like their 10th or 20th in some cases like therapist. And to me, therapy, it was like scratching the surface. Like it was just barely, like it wasn't getting to like, and I could feel again, because I can feel how people listen. I could feel that they were like very clinically listening and from a diagnostic lens, which was not seeing like my friend saw, right? And those are very, very different. Because clinically, from a clinician perspective, you're looking, with the DSM-5, in your head of like diagnosing. And you're looking for, how their experiences have impacted them from a clinical lens, which is not seeing the divine essence, which is not helping them access that, which is not holding that space. And so for me, there was this moment where everything came like a ton of bricks. Um, and it was like all the stuff I had suppressed and didn't want to look at and didn't want to feel and didn't think it was like affecting me was like coming back in full force all at once. And I was literally like again on the floor, in the fetal position, rocking back and forth. And this is a moment where also my husband was deployed. Thankfully, I had family visiting and my dad gave me a blessing and encouraged me to go and read scripture about the Savior healing. And I did that, and I was on my knees and I was in prayer, and I just was in so much pain. I literally thought I was going to die. Like it was like everything I had like didn't want to feel, thought I didn't need to feel, like had numbed out to was coming. And so I'm rocking, and then I like rolled to my knees and I was just pleading in prayer for it to be taken. And I had this incredible like my room went super bright light, like to where, my eyes, like when you're staring at the sun and your eyes, like you see like red a little bit because it's so bright. I had this moment where I could feel this like divine personage there, literally like pulling from me, like from the back of my neck, like pulling what felt like this black tar like substance, that like an octopus, that was like down my arms and my legs and encasing my heart and behind my eyes. And it was just like, it was actually quite painful. It was like this pulling this off of me. And I just kept pleading, like, take it all. Like, just please just take it all. And it was this incredible experience that in the moment that it was happening, I also was aware to the fact that I needed, because, divine timing is an interesting thing for me. Like I was doing all the things, and I was continuously like pleading and praying and doing everything I knew that was like what would help me, but yet I wasn't being helped. I still felt shackled. I still felt all of these things. And so while this was happening, it was incredibly painful, and there was this knowing that came with it. The knowing was that I needed to have access to my pain, to be able to go into the pain of others, to be able to then understand how to work with people and what they needed. And had I not been able to access that pain, I wouldn't have been able to go into their pain with them and then be led on like what works and what doesn't work, and discern even from the mental health of like, oh, this is why it didn't get, to like the level of the soul. And there was this training ground for me. And I needed to access that. But I had discovered so much, and I had created a new way of helping people that was not, it was informed by trauma, yes, but it was way beyond science. Um, and now I could be like relieved from that like inner torment, that felt like intense loneliness and things. And so and I remembered like it didn't all get taken. I felt like these like perfectly squared boxes of like the black that then expanded, and then I knew what to do with it. Like then I was, and so for me, this was this experience that just showed that there is some pain that is so deep that only heaven can reach, and that I should never, in the work that I do to help heal, like I need to be very clear that the ultimate thing I can do is to bring people to this, and to create experiences to where we're opening the door for divine intervention for them, if it's the right timing for them, and to just like help people create experience, like prepare themselves for this and seek this and invite this level of healing into their life. And so that was really pivotal for me.
Then again, when I when I sense and feel into the conversation, I feel a striking recognition. How many years was this moment? Like, was it how many years ago?
How many years ago? I think we're on almost 10. This was shortly after the friend experience. So I was in my, yeah, I mean, I'm 46, and this was like my late 30s. I'd have to go back to my journal to see the day.
No,
Um,
it's not
yeah.
about the day, but I really think what I really appreciate about, before we then dive into, let's say, more the unfolding of your own legacy, is that
Mhm.
I couldn't agree more that below or before or behind any DSM-5, I went to so many therapists, and when I met my last healer, she's just like, if you follow my protocol, this won't take long. It actually was very short. And
Mhm.
once I've reached below or beyond all these
Mhm.
definitions of how should I be or how should I show up, there was really
Mhm.
almost like you describe it, this like door opening to
Mhm.
fall into grace. And
Mhm.
I really appreciate that you're not trashing the, let's say, classical psychotherapeutical or family constellation aspects, because this is all
Mhm.
on a methodological and technical level. And I think
Mhm.
can prepare people to be vulnerable enough
Mhm.
to
Mm-hmm.
receive like divine blessing or grace.
Yeah.
Carie,
Yeah.
I think it's a good moment after having spent so much on the soul level, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
to to segue into the hidden legacy, right, of
Mm-hmm.
family structures and family wealth, and why do we both
Mm-hmm.
think that's so important and
Mm-hmm.
largely overlooked, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's let's have you sketch from these, from your professional family therapist standpoint, when was this like bigger vision coming, and where are you
Mm-hmm.
standing there before then we really sketch what makes the unique features and the
Mm-hmm.
methodology, and you can sketch some examples how that works for clients.
Yeah, yeah, and then we can map it. Well, so I left shortly after this experience. I actually left the mental health industry. Well, I didn't think I left. I thought I paused. And I got pulled into executive consulting, and then we moved to Germany. And it was this moment of wanting to be of higher service to humanity. And so I spent during COVID when we lived in Germany, like I spent actually like, well, it's now like 7 years, but like 5 dedicated years to fasting and praying and leaning in and doing my, studying quantum physics and like human design and gene keys of like, who am I really? And this gravitational pull inward. Who am I and what is my highest and greatest gift to humanity? And how can I be of greatest service to lift the whole? And what I discovered in that was kind of this mechanism of change that you speak to. Like my heart and soul is for the children and the rising generation. It is like for me, I believe part of adulting is to shift the world for them. Like when my son came into this world and I held him, like the thing that I thought was like, number one, I don't want to mess him up. And number two, I didn't just have motherly love that like, I want to protect and like care for him. It was, I want to change the world for him. And especially like the world that I experienced, and the world that I like saw and knew, that for me no longer worked. Like it's one thing to endure and all of those things. But when I became a mother, I was like, hell no to this being a world for other children. And so so for me, I was always then very strategically mapping out what is the greatest lever I can pull to create the biggest change, because I had worked with children and then I felt like they were stuck in their situation, and then I was like, okay, from a systemic perspective, I can't just work with the system of the individual, of the child. How can I impact their reality? And it's working. Then I was like, okay, I need to work with their parents. I need to help create that system to be a system that can create a different reality of home life for them. And so I became very, very fascinated with family, because I believe the family unit, as we like look at humanity standing at this like relational like pivotal moment and threshold right now, I believe that the next era is going to be determined by how our capacity to love and unify and to see each other. Well, number one, to know who we are and to connect to the light within us, and to be able to see and be present to another in a way that we help ignite a remembrance and light within them. And then collectively, I believe that's how we will lift and heal the world and unify the world. And it starts within every home, because going back to that kind of divine structure of a family unit, I believe that families are the nucleus that will then shift communities and shifts organizations. And it is the most direct path to a remembrance of who we really are at a soul level, and accessing our higher gifts to co-create inspired solutions. And so for me, it all comes back to our most intimate relationships and the mirror that is to our protective instincts and what I call the human default setting. And so in that search, I discovered hidden root causes of things that actually plague us from a societal perspective and a global system, that actually are the most prevalent and easy to identify in our home life.
Then I think it's a good moment to really go to the nucleus of the conversation. And why then choose legacy wealth and family offices? Because I
Yeah.
did a good chunk of family constellation work, but this
Hmm.
was intentionally, at least from his setup,
Hmm.
um, a very randomized encounter of people that you don't know. So classical family constellation work, where you
Hmm.
go directly into family systems, right?
Hmm.
Which is like the I would say pretty much the inverse of what I experienced. So was this coming by being guided, simply that you had access to like legacy families, or was it like consciously designed from a strategic standpoint, because like wealth is a huge lever, and when you can heal on a profound level legacy families, this
Hmm.
then enables them to transition their wealth in a different fashion.
Well, it all happened very serendipitously, actually, because as I was in this, like, how can I serve? Who is it that I'm supposed to, be here to serve? I did see this vision of legacy families and change makers. And so for me, just to clarify one context, it isn't just, families and family offices that I work with and that I seek out. Um, I was just automatically kind of, once I had that knowing of who I'm here to serve, literally I just had people put in my path that brought me into the family office space and conversations, and legacy conversations. And because I was looking for who are the most intentional people in the world about their family relationships and about legacy, and that was, I mean, I've heard more legacy conversations and discovery in the family office space than I have anywhere else. But what I'm seeing is that it's these families of influence who feel a responsibility and a desire to use their influence and their resources to make a bigger difference in the world. And that they could be, sometimes they're cultural leaders and public figures, sometimes they're entertainment industry influencers, sometimes they're next gen founders and entrepreneurs. And sometimes they're in this generational family office, and the kind of nexus of it is that there's a transition moment, like the passing on of this inheritance. And the younger generation has this kind of awakened sense to global impact and how to use that. And so for me, it came to me of like who I'm here to serve. And then doors started to open where I was introduced to these incredible families who truly are about using their resources and influence for good. And I think what's interesting and unique about the family office space is and I actually came from that. This Alistair, again, was kind of blind to my awareness at the moment. But when you're brought into the family office space, um, the first thing that everyone asks you is, do you come from this space? And it was the first time that I was asked that, I thought, do I come from this space? Oh, well, my grandpa had a family business, and I lived with him, and he was like a father figure after I was taken from my dad. And I was brought into his meetings, and then he died suddenly, and I saw the family dissolve. And I saw that the business that actually kind of acted like glue to the family, when it dissolved, and fell away, so did family relationships. And so actually, I didn't even connect the dots before that, like, yes, I come from this space. And I personally know the pain of seeing, well, both kind of the power dynamics within the family business and how that can really create some ruptures, but also when it doesn't succeed in transitioning. My, like, for example, all of my siblings, we all went to different houses, because we were living with my grandparents. And when my grandpa died, they lost the house. My grandma had to sell off like heirloom furniture, or I mean, like jewelry, and the whole family like scattered and was fragmented. And so, um, and my sense of belonging and connection to like a family, um, kind of fragmented. And so, yeah, that was kind of how I was. But to your bigger question of why do I believe that these people are kind of in a position to create the massive global change. And I guess that's why I work with them, is it's because my goal is to lift humanity. My ultimate goal is for everyone to remember who they are, and for every child to have a safe place, to feel deeply seen and safe. And for that, to lift humanity, is you're looking, and again, this wasn't cognitive, this was like, something I saw, and now I'm making sense of it cognitively and intellectually and strategically. But it's true that I've worked with a lot of nonprofits who have incredible people doing incredible things, but they're always looking for funding, and like the aspect of the magnitude that they can help is dependent on the access to resources often. And so what I'm seeing with this group of people is that there are people who have been prepared for this, and who have been placed in positions of influence and leadership, and they're being stirred up, and they've been being stirred up into this gravitational pull, and they're now at this point where they're asking themselves these questions, just like I was, of how can I use my gifts and my influence and my resources to lift humanity, to make the biggest ripple effect. And they're now being gathered together. And so I believe that as people in these positions of influence remember who they are and access higher capabilities within them and rise to use their positions of influence to truly do good in the world, we will move the need, and then and then know how to co-create inspired solutions and link arms with each other to be able to get out of their perspective and into someone else's, and see other people's gifts, and then co-create in inspired dynamic ways. That is how we will move the needle. That is how we will remember collectively. That is how it starts at home and then expands out, and it's how ultimately we'll unify and lift the world.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more on a theory of change level. I truly believe that this famous metaphor, who makes the needle tip, will actually come from some of the wealthiest families on the planet, because they have the highest degrees of freedom, the biggest resources, and you need time, money, effort, and proper guidance in order, to receive divine grace. And exceptions confirm the rule, obviously. Um, let's go more on your methodological level. Um,
And before we do,
yeah,
Alistair, there's
yeah.
one more important thing, because the obviously the goal is humanity, right? The thing that's important too to remember is that the world is looking at these people as the example, because for so many, they're still in the like rat race, so to speak, of they're trying to get the fame, they're trying to get the money, they're trying to like achieve. And when you're in that, and you're trying to just provide for yourself, like when you are focused on the necessities and the providing, often it blocks our access to being able to dream bigger, to being able to see the interconnectedness of us. And so many, like I feel like mass consciousness looks to people in these positions of fame and influence and resources as the thing that they're trying to aspire to. And when you work with those people, and through their influence, they then can show people what really the journey is, that it isn't actually, because you and I both know, in working in this community, that we work with people who have everything that the world is searching for, like, and think it will make them happy. When I have the fame and the money and the recognition and the prestige, then, because for all of us we fragment, and for all of us there's this searching for something externally that will fill an internal void or emptiness or loneliness. And the people that you and I work with, they have all of those things, they've checked all of those boxes, and then they discover, wait, I thought, just like I did, I thought these things were going to make me happy. I had the custom house and the private school and the handsome husband and beautiful children and all of the things. And that's when I realized, wait a second, like, it's not the things that are going to make me happy. And then it's a turning inward. And so at a global scale, when people that the world is looking to turn inward for that, instead of going externally, and they begin to remember, and then through their influence, they can, help those who are watching them understand that this is actually isn't it. I believe that's an important distinction too. And let me just add this other element, Alistair. I actually believe that people who had difficulty in the beginning, and this goes down to like the human design and Gene Key's perspective of core wounding to gift. I believe that the people in positions of influence who used their challenges as fuel to get ahead, and now are in these positions of influence the world is watching, they have encoded in our challenge, encoded in that, because we were all prepared. The Creator knew the challenges we were going to face. We were all prepared and endowed with the capacity to transmute our challenges. And on the other side of the wounding and the challenge and the pain and the trauma is the gift, the thing that we're here to bring to the world. And so when those people in positions of influence who used it as fuel, their challenge as fuel, they also know the pain of loneliness. They know the emptiness. They know the void. They know all these things. And like me, they were searching for not only wholeness and completeness and feeling complete and that peace internally, but they're also searching to create the home life that they never had. And to actually like create love that transcends, and a marriage that can last, and a family life that is like what they wish that they had. And that's why I believe they're going to help us return, to family, and model, instead of modeling what is being modeled now, they will shift the narrative. And then, then the ripple effect of that will be incredible.
And I think I'm just touched really on a soul level, because I see the magnitude of your undertaking. I still want to cover two things in the podcast. Get
Mm-hmm.
people a felt sense of the process and the methodology if they want to
Mm-hmm.
engage with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like always, the Horizon 1, 2, 3 framework, like where you now,
Yeah.
what do you think you can manage in the next few years, and
Mm-hmm.
what's really your own legacy perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
before we go into the Horizon 1, 2, 3 framework,
Mm-hmm.
how can people imagine to engage with you on a methodological level? Like what's the wrapper, what's the product level, what's the service level?
Yeah. So I on a private, like working with me privately, I only take up to 5 people a year because of the depth of our work. So we take people through this transcendent relationships is kind of the arc um, of how we work. And we take people through kind of 3 stages. One is remembering who you really are and accessing your inner authority. I actually never want someone to, kind of like we do when we hire a coach or a therapist, there's a sense of delegating authority to them to tell us what we need. And actually, for me, it's so much of it is about, I want you to keep that authority. Don't give it to anyone else. I actually want to strengthen your connection to your inner authority and you to find your inner compass. And so and what is the most direct path to that? What's showing up in your life that is the most that we can use as an access point to that, to you reclaiming your divine identity and intelligence and access to your gifts and your inner knowing and your compass um, and your capacity to love. And so that's the remembrance phase. And then the return phase is using our intimate relationships, emotionally intimate relationships, as those confronting mirrors to what's happening within us, and learning a new way of being. It starts with seeing people. So I guess I have to explain hidden root causes just briefly. Spiritual fragmentation is what I describe as this forgetting of who we all are, um, and forgetting our divine identity because of something that happened. And there's this, I kind of broke it down into like, oh, there's like 5 steps for me of why I no longer believed in that, and now believed I wasn't good enough, and now had this like human lens of like criticism towards myself and criticism of others. It's because we see through this like human biological system that is designed from a frequency of fear, and that is very critical. And so that shifts when you remember who you are. And so learning to see other people, to see yourself and someone else differently, and to be able to really see the essence of who they are, and be present in a way that actually overrides then this like default, this what I call human default setting, which is all of the like neurological and physiological ways that our human system will sabotage our relationships. And so it's about recognizing these like default settings and then learning a new way of being present, to where instead of the default setting, which causes division and disconnection, and oppositions colliding, now we actually are seeking out differing views because it's essential for us to be able to co-create, and it expands us. And so moving from the protective frequency of fear into the expansive higher capacity to love and expand and co-create. And that's through the return phase. And then it's, we take people into this legacy co-creation through the rise. And that's using their sphere of influence, of course, starting at home and then through their organizations and leadership, to truly like serve at their highest capacity, their higher purpose. And so because of the depth of that work, and that's, all encompassing, I work with up to 5 clients a year for that depth. And we're newly starting because now I feel like people are just magnetized. And I'm finding incredible human beings who have been prepared. We're launching actually in February our first group. We're calling it the Luminary Council. And so that's another way. And it's a very intimate circle of 12 people who we will take through a very custom curated experience for 6 months. And that includes in-person experiences. And the whole goal of that is to create a sacred container where they can both remember who they are and discover this higher capacity of presence in a safe space. Because the people that I work with are catalysts in their sphere of influence, and they need a safe space to hone this new capacity to where it can override their default setting, to where they can show up in powerful ways, in their positions of influence. And so that's kind of the two, the group and then this private container.
So technically put, low volume, very high touch. So
Mm-hmm.
let's look a little bit into the crystal ball. So when you say
Mm-hmm.
you work with maybe 5 max a year plus
Mm-hmm.
this other container containing
Mm-hmm.
a dozen, what would be something that you want to achieve on a horizon 2, like let's say in the next
Mm-hmm.
few years, let's say
Yeah.
ballpark up until you're 50, like the next 4 or 5 years? And
Mm-hmm.
why do you think that those catalysts with power,
Mm-hmm.
influence, political lever, and a lever
Mm-hmm.
through their material wealth will
Mm-hmm.
then trickle down to influence the sphere to create a new gestalt? Because you're picking
Mm-hmm.
pretty much those influencers, right? That
Mm-hmm.
I would say pretty much the picture that people paint is, okay, they're on a yacht, they have like multiple houses, they may have a
Mm-hmm.
helicopter, they have a collection of like old cars or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, like all the fancy material things. So what's
Mm-hmm.
the new gestalt, and what makes you believe that you get enough of a sum total of these heavy hitter influencers to really change the gestalt on a global level, so that people truly aspire to also reach their level of, let's say, healing, coherence, love,
Mm-hmm.
and like contribution?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you're saying that, I remembered that because it's new, I forgot that there's one other way. Working with a family office actually in Europe called Virtus. And they're designing the entire family office system around these 3 pillars. And they're bringing concierge level wellness and and fun. And we're creating, so that is going to launch also at the beginning of in Q1 of 26. So we're getting to see what a family office can be when focused not there's an element of, for sure, of the wealth. But when we're not just focused on asset and wealth management, and we're really focused on this remembrance and return and this rise with wellness weaved into it, and wealth and impactful like wealth weaved into it. And so that is actually the third way that people can work with me, is through the Virtus Family Office in Europe. And to answer your question of like bigger picture, like right now I'm in the I feel like the gathering right now. It's the initial people who are deeply magnetized to the message are just, coming to me, which is really incredible, because they've been prepared and now they're recognizing that this is their moment, and that this journey feel like it's very deeply resonant. And I would say, you said 5 years. Is that where you want me to go with it? Or you're saying big picture?
No, I want the mid picture, more like
Okay.
from an organizational design perspective. I will ask you the very
Okay.
big picture, like your own
Okay.
deathbed, in a bit.
Yeah.
No, really,
Yeah.
like if you get all of that off the ground, I see now at
Yeah. Yeah.
least three ways to interface with you, your
Uh-huh.
ecosystem, the deeper
Yeah.
remembrance, the return, and the rise to truly strive to
Yeah.
make a difference. Like,
Yeah.
what do you want to achieve in the next couple of
Yeah.
years?
Well, really linking arms with people who have, I would say, in two parts. One, who also have their own gifts that are parallel and that are harmonious with this work, because I, I know my gifts now, but I'm one person, and I only represent a portion of what is needed, right? And so, and I actually really appreciate, Alistair, you are one of these connectors who can see people and connect them. And that's actually the next, I feel like, phase, well, like part of it, the beginning, but then in the next couple of years, it's going to be more of it, more of the gathering of those who are linking arms with their gifts and their influence, and they do something else. They represent a different piece of the pie, because all of it is essential. And so it isn't just me working with my clients, but it's contributing to the greater whole, and linking arms with people who have their distinct gifts and their calling, and they know who they are. They can access these higher capabilities, and they're partnering their incredible intellect with inspiration, and we're linking arms and creating, these gatherings of other catalysts and leaders and organizations to come together to create a greater, you know like because we have to be able to link arms and co-create together. And so the next few years will be a gathering and a co-creation phase. And that is just and it's going to start with a nucleus group of people already doing incredible things, coming together and co-creating. And it's just going to continue to expand out. And the light, it's like the nucleus then activates and continues to gather and magnetize, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow.
So what's your boldest, most badass own legacy? So obviously we're in the age of longevity. I still think
Mhm.
that our generation may still die at 80, 90, or 115. So we both hopefully still have some years left. What's your boldest vision when you hand over the baton to the next generation? You pass out
Mhm.
of this body, this life is done, you hand over
Mhm.
to a bunch of amazing people you inspired and helped to heal themselves and connect to the divine essence. Like what's
Mhm.
the biggest picture vision?
Mhm. I see every human being knowing who they are and being a catalyst to someone else. And I see every child being completely seen and deeply held and nurtured in a loving and safe environment. And I see that the family is the center of societal healing and unity and innovation. And we no longer have this like, ooh, work life balance, dynamic, because we're actually creating from a completely different space. I see every family unit finding its own unique kind of like pulse and genius that impacts and influences others. And so we are each activated, and together this interdynamic interconnected, kind of, I don't know, like I'm pulsing with my hands. It's like this, I just feel like we've shifted from the frequency of fear into a frequency of love and co-creation. And that's the environment that I want to pass on to the rising generation for them to, and I actually believe, because I'm very, very passionate about empowering the rising generation, I believe that they are going to then, look, what I want them to inherit from us is that we are the generation that is shifting the trajectory, and that they are going to be rising into this new space of infinite capabilities, unlimited possibilities, and creating from a space of abundance and love and connection to the divine within themselves and the master creator.
Amazing. I just feel really touched and expanded through that conversation. So I have nothing to share but a big thank you, and happy to be of service to spreading the word so that people can connect to you. Maybe when you speak some closing words, what are the easiest ways to connect with you and interface with you?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, Carie Bailey. Verakai Legacy is my website right now. It's actually going through redesign. And I'll just give you, the listeners of Alistair's podcast, my email, Carie@verakailegacy.com. If you want to directly reach out to me, I believe that, Alistair, you have a quality of people that are magnetized to you that I would be happy to connect with.
Amazing. Carie, thanks so much for the conversation.
Yes, thank you, Alistair.